Hey everybody, welcome back to another episode of Drilling Deeper. I'm Kevin Yannick, Editor-in-Chief of Pit and Quarry, and I'm joined by our Managing Editor, Jack Kapansky. Jack, how you doing today?
Thrilled as always to be here, Kevin. Always excited to come and cut it up a little bit with you. 10th episode here, very exciting. Moderate milestone in the life of Drilling Deeper, so excited to get into it.
Before we start, let's give a shout out to our episode sponsor. Geologic uses scientific investigation and engineering design to provide innovative solutions to the most challenging mining, construction, and development issues in a safe, effective, and cost-efficient manner. When it needs to be done right the first time, call Geologic at 770-824-4212. That's Geologic. Thanks to our episode sponsor. I was just thinking that. We got double digits on our episode numbers now. You see podcasts out there that are talking about episode 137. I'm like, oh my God, that's, we think about the work that goes into this. There's planning behind the scenes. It's different than planning for a magazine, but it's been a lot of fun. And behind the scenes, we're regularly kind of trying to track what's happening with the podcast, what sort of engagement we get. And, Jack's really more on top of the statistics and the growth of this and how we've been, catching on within the aggregate industry. And I guess one thing we kind of learned, maybe by episode 5, 6, 7, Jack, is that, there's not really one metric to measure a podcast by, in terms of talking about the growth of Drilling Deeper, because there's a lot of different ways that people are engaging a podcast.
Yeah, and especially in a situation like ours and how a lot of podcasts are doing it nowadays, where they will have audio as well as a video component on YouTube and in other places, and obviously we host episodes on our website as well. You've got data coming from so many different places, and you'll run into situations where one outlet defines a listener as this, the other outlet defines a listener as this, whereas there's one term for someone that listens for more than 0 seconds on one site, there's a different term for someone that listens for more than 0 seconds on another site. There's a lot of minutia in it to kind of actually weed through and get down to sort of the nitty gritty of it. But over 9 episodes, going into 10 episodes now, Kevin and I were talking just before the show that first episode came out November 6th, so it's been about half a year, a little under half a year now that we've been doing this, and obviously we're thoroughly enjoying it. And I think over that time, numbers have been positive. I think we're getting some traction. People are figuring out about us. I was in Georgia a couple weeks ago, and we had a lot of people came by our booth saying, "Oh, I heard you guys were doing a podcast." We had our podcast cards out. A lot of people were excited about it. So word is spreading, and watch out, Joe Rogan. Here we come.
We'll try to get there. a little more momentum to get that far.
Got to start somewhere.
Yeah, but has been fun. I went to the SME show. I guess it was last week or earlier in the month, out in Phoenix, and yeah, Dino Vitan's our associate publisher, and I, we were passing out our Drilling Deeper cards just to make people aware that, hey, Pit and Quarry has a podcast if you don't know, and everybody seemed pretty excited. Think about the people in our industry, sales guys on the manufacturing or dealer side, a lot of times they're just on the road in a truck driving from customer site to customer site, and there's time to kill, for guys who are, going from operation to operation on the producer side as well. So people are finding us. I think we're finding that some topics get better engagement than others. So, we're trying to learn from the numbers, I guess I could say, and put out content that's best for you. We want to bring more people onto the show. We recently had John Zaponiak and Thomas Hahn when we were down at our roundtable. So you can look for, additional guests on Drilling Deeper in the weeks and months to come.
Yeah, and just to add on to that, obviously we enjoyed doing this, and, we have certain things we like talking about. It seems like, we've done 9 episodes so far, and I think we're going to get into it a little bit today. It seems like maybe 7 or 8 of the episodes we've done so far, autonomous hauling has come up. There are certain topics that we obviously enjoy talking about or sort of come up naturally a lot, but at the same time, you guys are the ones listening to it. We're making this for all of you. So any feedback that you listeners have, any feedback that anything you want us to talk about, shoot us an email, reach out, jkopansky@northcoastmedia.net, kyannick@northcoastmedia.net. Let us know what you want to hear, and, we'll try to make it happen, because obviously, we want to keep giving you guys content that you enjoy listening to, and you'll keep following and subscribing, to pull a YouTube term.
the topic of the day, the one we drew up for episode 10 here, is the Pit and Quarry Hall of Fame. It's something maybe some of you are aware of that the magazine has. We've, as I've talked about in the past, long been a magazine, I guess 107 years, starting off as a handbook, evolving into a magazine. And, we've got events like our roundtable that we just talked about. Our last 2 episodes were, kind of breaking down some of the fodder, the conversation that we had down in Florida, coming off one of our Pit and Quarry events, the Pit and Quarry Roundtable and Conference. We've got another event coming up in the industry calendar. It's March 24th. It's the Pit and Quarry Hall of Fame induction ceremony, and it's the 9th or 10th one. Gosh, I think it's the 9th one we've had in the history of our Hall of Fame, which goes all the way back to 2013, when we inducted, I believe it was 7 individuals in our inaugural class. And after we get through our ceremony on the 24th of March, our Hall of Fame is going to be up to 40 members. I was around, actually. I guess maybe I'm dating myself a little bit, but, I was around for that first Hall of Fame ceremony. And when the discussions for the Pit and Quarry Hall of Fame, originally came up in, 2012 and into 2013, there were some doubts that a Hall of Fame, a black tie Hall of Fame where, gentlemen show up wearing tuxedos and, ladies come in their evening gowns, whether that could actually work in the aggregates industry. Because, the first thing we think about when you think about quarries, is people getting dressed up, in their finest gowns and suits, right?
Of course.
But we had some doubts as we were trying to establish the Hall of Fame, back in 2013, and it was received once we proved that we could execute it. Our founding class had some of the the great names in our industry's history, like Arthur Taggart, Samuel Calvin McClanahan, and that was the largest class we had year one. I believe it was 7, and we've had the Hall of Fame every year, minus a couple of ConExpo years. We used to have the induction ceremony at ConExpo, and I think just like we've taken feedback on our podcast and in other areas of our business, we realized that ConExpo just has so many moving parts. There's so much going on in Las Vegas that we decided, what, we want our Hall of Fame. If we're going to do it best and we want people to be celebrated as best they can, we want to do it during Ag 1 years. So we had a Hall of Fame ceremony. Gosh, I guess it was a couple years ago, Jack, in 22.
Yeah, and that encompassed the 2022 and 2021 classes. With COVID sort of putting 2021 off a little bit, and that was the 2022 class with Ted Baker, Dave Tomey, and the 21 class of E.J. Burke and Nathan Stedman. So, that was my first experience at the Hall of Fame, and it was it's a blast. Obviously it's a very very formal, very professional night, and it's sort of the culmination of incredible careers for all these men. And you see past Hall of Famers, you see so many people from the industry come to celebrate these careers and these people, and it's a great time, and especially with the surrounding environment of Ag 1, the NSSGA annual convention, everything kind of going on. I am really looking forward to this, this week coming up here in just a couple of weeks. We head out, or at least I head out on the Sunday, the 24th, there till the 27th, and never need a reason to go to Nashville. I always enjoy that trip. It's probably second on my list to San Antonio. For those that have listened for a while know my affinity for San Antonio. But the Hall of Fame is just certainly special, and I'm thrilled to be a part of a brand that does such a good job with it, and obviously takes it as seriously as it does. And it's also cool. I'm looking forward to hopefully in the next maybe year or two getting out to Leadville, Colorado, to the National Mining Hall of Fame, where I know you and Dino went. Probably about a year ago, a little under a year ago to see it?
Yeah, that's when Dino and I were at SME, the Mine Exchange show, for a couple of days, and we got up the mountain, 10,000-foot elevation in Leadville. I actually was struggling up there, getting a little bit lightheaded. It took me a few minutes to adjust. Dino was laughing a little bit, but I would have been laughing if it was Dino, the other way around.
Of course.
It was kind of humbling to see the Pit and Quarry Hall of Fame inductee plaques, because we give a plaque to each inductee, and then we have a replica plaque that actually is fixed on the walls, or some of the walls of the Mining Hall of Fame, which is the only federally chartered mining Hall of Fame and museum in the country, in the United States. So I know some of our past Hall of Famers have been up there. I think George Sidney from McClanahan's one, and there have been a couple others whose names are escaping me, who actually made that trip. And when they see their name, their face the description on their plaque in terms of what they did and contributed to the aggregate industry, in this special facility. I think it gives them reason to pause. And, as somebody like you, Jack, who's, kind of behind the scenes helping to facilitate the celebration, of these men, going to be 40 after the ceremony this year. It's something special, like you said. I don't know that we anticipated that it would be, like I said, as well received or kind of exude the feelings that come about. But, you experienced those induction speeches a couple years ago when Ag 1 was in Nashville along with our Hall of Fame. And to see men who've done 40, 50-year careers and, poured themselves into our industry, whether it's an equipment manufacturer or producer or there's some others that contributed in different ways to the betterment of aggregates. You see tiers, you see, sons and daughters or grandchildren of, those who are long gone get up there and they're like, wow, the gravity of what their family member did or the gravity of what that person did, really hits them in that moment when their peers or the peers in the industry are, looking upon them and celebrating them in such a special fashion.
Yeah, and you mentioned the word humbling when you talked about the National Mining Hall of Fame, and it's something that when I came on to Pit and Quarry in 21, I know you and Rob and Dino had told me that we had a Hall of Fame and that we were doing this, and I kind of thought, oh, that was pretty cool, and it was a nice touch. And when I actually went to my first Hall of Fame in 22, it kind of hit me you said gravity, but kind of the level of respect and the level of admiration that we as a brand have cultivated with this Hall of Fame and the names that are in there and the recognition that we're able to provide. It's just such a special thing. And it's, again, like I mentioned earlier, it's one of the reasons I'm so grateful to be a part of this brand. And, in talking with Dave Tomey and EJ Burke for the profiles I did back in 2022, talking this year, and I know we're going to get into this a little bit, talking with Neil Hise from Cemco and Tom Hill from Summit for this year's profiles that I did. I mean, more deserving men you could not find to be inducted into the Hall of Fame. It seems like I do not envy our selection committee for having to, sort of pick and choose out of the pool of nominees that we get, because all of these people are just so incredibly deserving, have had such immense impacts on our industry. So it's just such a special thing, and I'm thrilled that we're able to offer this recognition and this honor to this year's class and to all classes before.
And for those who aren't aware, anybody can submit a nomination for the Pit and Quarry Hall of Fame. It can be anybody who's made an impact on the aggregate industry. And I think the criteria we put forward for our selection committee is somebody who really moved the needle, whether it was a forward thinker or an innovator, somebody who moved the needle for the industry on a national level or even on a global or international level. One thing, too, about a Hall of Fame, Jack, I mean, I'm a big baseball guy. You're a big sports guy. I think what a Hall of Famer means, I mean, to me, that's the 1% of the 100. We've probably debated offline a little bit. I know I've debated guys here in the Pit and Quarry office about, baseball Hall of Famers, and, there's Babe Ruth out there, and then, don't agree necessarily with everybody who's in the baseball Hall of Fame or the football Hall of Fame or whatever, but to me, what makes a Hall of Fame special is this is the 1%. I mean, you could be in the upper 3% of whatever it is you did, whether it's, the aggregate industry or a sport or something. But to me, what separates, the 1% from the 3% or a Hall of Famer is that, you're the few, man. You're not one of many. So I guess I bring that up because I've seen the Baseball Hall of Fame change their standards a little bit. I always use the name Harold Baines, and I hope Harold Baines isn't listening. He had a great career for the White Sox and the Cleveland Indians at one time. But yeah, I mean, I think it's really important for us to, hold the line and I think our selection committee over the last decade has done a good job of, vetting and determining, who is the 1% of our industry. Mm-hmm. It's not an easy task.
Yeah, and I think that's a perfect way to put it. And, you kind of talk about that difference of maybe the 3% versus the 1%. I'm going to get a shameless plug in here for my favorite, or possibly second favorite, Cleveland Indian / Guardian of all time. I know for a few years Casey Blake was on the ballot, and it's so funny because, You know, when I think of Casey Blake, it's like if there were 100 people in the major leagues, Casey Blake would be like number 50. Just one of the most average guys in the world, but he ends up on the Hall of Fame ballot, which again, to your point, is kind of like, you know, the standards may be shifting a little bit. But, you know, bringing it back to our Hall of Fame again, you know, we obviously have a selection pool of nominees to choose from, and we have our selection committee that we work with in choosing these nominees. And again, like you said, it's really finding that, you know, there might be someone that's maybe on the cusp, and it's kind of like one of those things where, you know, oh, they might not be first ballot, maybe they're second ballot, maybe they're third ballot, but then you have guys, you know, you have certain people like some of our Hall of Famers that it's like their name pops up and it's a no-brainer. And you know, I won't give away your presentation of your last name that we're going to discuss here today, but that's someone that I kind of thought of as a no-brainer when I heard that he had gotten in. So looking forward to chatting a little bit about this year's class today.
Yeah, it's funny. There were one or two names going in this year, and I won't name them, but I had a couple people approach me. They're like, they weren't in the Hall of Fame already? Well, again, this is our ninth ceremony, I believe, and, you know, we do other Halls of Fames at our parent company as well, and we're talking about 100-plus years of history. So, you know, I guess to this point, you can make an argument that, you know, we've been enshrining some of the, you know, the original contributors to the aggregate industry, and, you know, over the last several years or few years, we've been making more to the modern day. But I think there is a good mix of like the early years contributors to modern day individuals who are in our Hall of Fame. And like I said, anybody can nominate somebody. You know, we've seen nominations of all sorts. You know, whether it was like a 40 or 50-year truck driver, or, you know, somebody who led the number 1 or number 2 company in our industry. I think the bar on, you know, what makes a Hall of Famer, you know, is different on those sorts of people. And I think, you know, we get a lot of nominations for people who are lifelong aggregates contributors who maybe impacted a community or a region or a state. But again, I think what makes our Hall of Fame, what makes the Pit and Quarry Hall of Fame a little bit different is, you know, these are people who affected change or made change for the industry at large across the country. Mm-hmm. We're proud of our 2024 class, and we're looking forward to celebrating them at the Omni Nashville Hotel March 24th, the evening of March 24th in Nashville, Tennessee. Our class of 24 includes the following individuals. It's Tom Hill from Summit Materials, Neil Hise from Cemco, Lewis Johnson from LJ Manufacturing, and Charlie Luck IV from Luck Stone. Got a lot of comments from readers and, you know, partners and friends of the magazine. Like, man, that's a solid class. You got a couple producers in there. You got a couple of folks on the equipment manufacturing side. Some big names that carry a lot of weight, that wield a lot of respect around quarries, around aggregates. And you know, Jack, I'm going to let you kick it off here. Basically, you know, from this point forward for a while during this episode, we kind of want to just talk about our experiences engaging, you know, our Hall of Famers as we're getting ready for the ceremony. You know, kind of what we've learned. We wanted to talk a little bit about them and what they contributed to the industry. Then we'll probably have a little bit of fodder outside the Hall of Fame after that. But you know, part of Jack's assignment for our Hall of Fame this year was to handle you know, Tom Hill and tell his story a little bit. Jack, what did you find as you dug into Tom and his case?
Yeah, such a good guy, such a nice guy, insanely smart. You know, far smarter than me. Would not want to get into a battle of wits with Tom Hill. He would take me down real quick. But you know, his is an interesting story where, you know, you see a lot of these guys and a lot of the people in our Hall of Fame sort of have aggregates background, or aggregates as in their family, you know, their second, third, fourth, fifth, sixth, seventh, whatever generation, you know, to sort of tease a little bit, Neil Hise, who I'm going to talk about here in a little bit, is, you know, is a second generation construction man. Not the case with Tom. He, you know, he wanted to be a lawyer. He graduated from Duke. He got his undergrad there. Sort of changed his mind, wanted to go get his MBA, went to Trinity College in Dublin, where he did a little bit of his undergrad before finishing it at Duke. The director of his MBA program was also a director at CRH, obviously a major aggregate producer, headquartered over in Ireland. So he ended up getting a job with CRH, specifically Oldcastle, the American arm of CRH, in 1980. Stayed there until 2008, ended up taking on different roles with Oldcastle, heading up their materials division, taking over as Oldcastle CEO eventually, was super involved in mergers and acquisitions. I think 187 is the total that he completed, and he helped buoy Oldcastle's revenue from 100 million to I think it was 7 billion. So I mean, the guy was busy, and he was good at what he did when he was at Oldcastle. So and then eventually 2008 rolls around, and as he puts it, he was sort of passed over for the CRH CEO position over over across the pond, and so he decided at the time to sort of try something new, and just casually started Summit Materials, which is now one of the largest aggregate producers in the nation. No big deal. Just started one of the biggest producers in the country like it was nothing. Obviously, there was a lot that went into it. Started that in 2009, had a lot of help from some Oldcastle friends, Damian Murphy being one of them. I was lucky enough to also talk to Damian for my story on Tom. By the way, all 4 profiles on our Hall of Famers will be in our Pit and Quarry March issue, which you should be getting very soon, as we're recording this here on Thursday, the 7th of March. So hopefully those will be hitting your mailboxes soon. Started Summit in 2009, took Summit public in 2015. He considers that one of his best memories, and I know when we were working together to try to get some photos, he sent me some pictures from the IPO where he, his family, some Summit employees got to be on the floor of the New York Stock Exchange, ring the bell, do all that exciting stuff. So seems like a very cool experience. Stayed with the company until about 2020, and Noonan, who is currently the president and CEO, took over at that point. Still working in the industry, kind of. He's at Foley Concrete Products in an advisory role, but in his own words, it's sort of when and not if he gets involved in aggregates again. So, when we were talking a month or two ago, he sort of mentioned, he's like, well, my non-compete was up about 6 months ago, so I'm ready to get back into aggregates. So, he even kind of quipped, he's like, I don't know if I'm going to do anything like Summit again, but he really does love aggregates, and that was so clear. And again, with a guy as smart and as savvy as he is, I have no doubt that whatever his next venture is, he's going to be incredibly successful in. And just a great guy to talk to, such an awesome story, and obviously a very, very well deserving Hall of Famer.
Yeah, we're looking forward to enshrining Tom in another couple of weeks here. When Summit went public in 2015, that's something we haven't really seen at all since. I guess you could argue, Knife River spun off of MDU Resources Group. I guess it was last year, sometime in 23. Now the month's kind of escaping me, but he kind of went where no man in the industry had gone before, and kind of the way you described it, Jack, in terms of like creating someone from scratch in a way. He had some help, obviously, and when I saw that it was 187 transaction, I was thinking, man, that seems like multiple lifetimes worth. And I'm sure, again, there's a team there. Every CEO or leading person has their supporting cast. So, but that's a lot of activity, and maybe we won't see the next Summit. But I think it's interesting too, in the context of our Hall of Fame, Jack. You think about the history of our industry, and there weren't public aggregate producing companies 100 years ago.
Mm-hmm.
Some of the people enshrined in our Hall of Fame, they never saw that day. But our industry has very much become more corporate. If you would have told Arthur Taggart or Lewis Johnson 100 or 50 years ago that there'd be people on the floor of the New York Stock Exchange ringing the bell, ushering in a new era of a public aggregate producing company, men like that might have had some doubts about it, but it kind of goes to show the change that we've seen, and Tom Hill's story, and in the case of Summit, is a really good example of ushering in some change, and that's the direction the industry is going. I mean, I think we've talked about consolidation of our industry in the past, and we've got some big companies in our industry, and like you said, Summit's one of the biggest producers out there now, so one to watch.
Yeah, and you talk about that number, that 187 acquisitions. The wild thing is, his career has spanned from 1980 now to 2024, so we're looking at 44 years, nearly half a century, and that period of 180 transactions, of all those mergers and acquisitions was from, I believe it was 92 to '06. So in only 14 of his 45, 44 years, that's when those transactions took place. You got to imagine in the 11, 12 years he was with Summit, it's even more than that. And there was a pretty impressive stat that someone from Summit provided to a story you put together, Kevin, back in 2020 when Tom Hill stepped down. You know, they were talking about the impact Hill had on Summit, obviously, you know, the company he founded. And it was Howard Land, Summit's chairman of the board, talked about how Hill guided the company from a small private construction company into a public company with net revenues of more than $2 billion. So he's kind of responsible for turning two companies, Oldcastle and Summit, into multi-billion-dollar companies. Not easy for people to do that once, much less twice. So this guy, I mean, what a career, what a life. Congratulations, Tom. It was great being able to talk with you, and very much looking forward to meeting you in Nashville here in a couple weeks.
And maybe more to come. I guess we'll stay tuned.
Yeah, exactly. Who knows?
Well, one of our other 2024 class inductees is Lewis Johnson, the founder of LJ Manufacturing, and he's the only posthumous inductee we have in this class. We do have those from time to time. You know, as I mentioned, you know, we got a great history, a long history for our industry. So, so it takes time, I guess, to get into the Pit and Quarry Hall of Fame. I guess I could say, you know, fairly, one of the comments I got from an outsider was, "How is Lewis Johnson not in the Hall of Fame at this point?" Well, he hadn't been nominated. And, you know, as I kind of dug into his story, Jack, as you know, as you put Tom Hill's profile together, I put Lewis Johnson's story together. You know, I realized it's almost like time escapes people, or time can escape a person easily, because, you know, his greatest contributions to our industry were, I guess you could say, 50, 60, 70 years ago. Although this is a man who lived to the age of 91, died in 2007, and he pretty much was tinkering or working in or around the aggregate space, the manufacturing side of our industry, pretty much up until the day he died, or until the few days before he died, which is astounding to me. I mean, for a 90 or 91-year-old man, grew up, I guess it was Great Depression. You know, I think he experienced the Great Depression, and because of that, I think it probably partly made him who he was. You know, anybody who grew up as a child, or, you know, probably had a parent do that, lived through that, you know, they were somebody who was conditioned to work hard. And, you know, Lewis Johnson was somebody to do that. As I embarked on trying to tell Lewis Johnson's story, one of the things I was struggling with was, like, how do I find somebody, you know, because 50, 60, 70 years have gone by, who, you know, knew him at the point in time of his greatest contributions, you know, because he brought out the roller bearing cone crusher in 1956. He developed the triple shaft horizontal screen. He was instrumental in the advancement of portable plants. But, you know, we're going back, you know, half a century. You know, you had mentioned that Neil Hise remembered, you know, Lewis Johnson. You know, Neil, again, is another one of our 2024 class inductees. But again, time escapes everybody. But I was fortunate to work with Cade Seeley from Kimball Equipment Company. You know, Cade had actually nominated Lewis Johnson for our latest voting cycle this time around, and you know, there was a lot of support for Lewis Johnson's case, and Cade was, you know, very supportive of me personally, and trying to make sure that we tell his story as best we can. I've had a lot of luck in the past too, as we're going about, you know, because a lot of times, especially in the early years, Jack, you know, we're enshrining people who, you know, they've been long gone, and, you know, we're lucky if we find a son or a daughter or a grandchild to kind of reminisce about their, you know, their loved one. And I was kind of giving up hope because I wasn't having any luck. I used to go on zabasearch.com, you know, do family ancestry type stuff, and I just was not having any luck. So I was going to try to just go into our archives and, you know, tell kind of a baseline story about Lewis Johnson. But Cade, you know, he's done some genealogy work. You know, he came back within like a half a day, and he's like, yeah, I found his daughter. She lives in Oregon.
That's awesome.
I know that makes me feel real great about being the editor-in-chief of Pit and Quarry, you know, from the research standpoint.
Hey, listen, I've learned you can't beat someone with a lot of free time and an ancestry subscription.
Have you dabble with that a little bit, or?
You know, I have it. I haven't really gone much into it, but I know my wife's grandma is like essentially their family historian when it comes to ancestry. So I'll tell you what, you know, don't don't sell yourself short. The people that spend a lot of time on there are it's a different breed. So
that's a rabbit hole to go down.
Yeah, 100%.
But Cade, like I said, he tracked down Lewis Johnson's last living child. Her name's Susan Moorhead, and she lives in Oregon, and she's actually going to come to our Hall of Fame ceremony and deliver some acceptance remarks on behalf of her father. But I was really fortunate to be able to sit down for a couple hours over the phone as we were preparing our coverage for the March issue, Jack. And Susan was a kid really when her dad was kind of in his heyday, building, designing, selling crushers. But she talked about family vacations. There had to be a gravel pit or a sand pit or a stop in the realm of business. And that was kind of her childhood. If they were going to go on family vacations, she talked about the first apartment that her mother and father had in Oregon. It was actually attached or very, very close. I guess it was adjacent to the first LJ manufacturing factory out there. So her recollection was from almost like an anecdotal standpoint of being the daughter of this guy. And I found it kind of interesting that, she did, and I guess it's not surprising that, she wouldn't know the nuts and bolts of, his crushers, his screens, his portable plant advancements. But she talked about who this guy was, and it was fascinating. I mean, he just lived and breathed the industry. I asked her too, like, when did you realize that your father and mother, because she talked about how her mother, Ann, was, instrumental in his success and the success of LJ Manufacturing. I asked her, when did you realize that, your dad was really onto something? And she told me, it was around 1965 because the family got to go to France and her father had licensed LJ equipment to a company called Dragon. I think it was in Dragon, France. The city's Dragon in France. And she's like, that's kind of cool. As a kid, I got to, take this trip overseas, over the pond. And I think then and there she realized, man, this is kind of cool. Some of the opportunities that this is creating for us as a family. LJ sold in the 1970s, and it sold to Chicago Pneumatic in I think 75. Don't quote me, I guess, but for $6.6 million, which in today's money, I didn't do the math, Jack, but I'm sure it's quite a bit. I mean, $6.6 million.
Let me pull up an inflation calculator here while you keep going.
But his time at LJ, the equipment that he developed was under the the LJ name and brand, and those are the big contributions, because we see that the triple shaft horizontal screen, the roller bearing cone crusher, those models, those Lewis Johnson models, they're still highly utilized today. They're instrumental to aggregate processing. A number of the leading manufacturing companies, the equipment manufacturing companies in our space, they have their versions of his equipment. So that's a testament to what Lewis Johnson did. And I know there were some unfortunate feelings, after LJ sold, and it kind of changed hands a few times over the course of its history. But like I said, Lewis Johnson's a guy who worked tirelessly, probably again because of growing up in the Great Depression, and the people of that era only knew work. So later in life, he did another crusher company called JCB. He did yet another crushing company called Durable Crushers, and he was a big golfer. He even got into developing custom golf clubs with a company called Forward Golf. Didn't prove truly viable, I guess, in the end, based on what his daughter said. But this is a guy who had a motor that wouldn't stop, and I think that's probably the case for a lot of the men who are in our Hall of Fame. They poured themselves into their work.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so I looked up the inflation adjustment from $6.6 million to today comes out to about $53.85 million. So that was a pretty penny for the Johnson family. But and you even kind of mentioned growing up in the Depression and sort of having that that mentality to really work hard and to sort of fight for what you have. And I know, at least just from personal experience, having both of my dad's parents be born in 1917, their parents, both Polish immigrants, it's something that I've seen firsthand, that sort of mentality of having to scrap and really work hard for what you have. And just from what you've been telling me about Lewis over the time, researching for his profile and hearing more about it here, I mean, again, like you said, just the nonstop motor that this guy seemed to have is enviable. And you pair a nonstop motor like that with the ingenuity and sort of the genius that someone like that has. That's a dangerous combo right there, and that's why this man's in our Hall of Fame.
Yeah, he changed the industry, in multiple ways. You're the editor-in-chief of Portable Plants now. I mean, and he was one of the early guys who helped to really bring that along. And we see portable plants, portable crushing, portable screening plants in use, all over the world now. So, LJ, Lewis Johnson's company was central to that. And maybe the only other factoid I would share on Lewis Johnson was his first name, because, for many years, I've always heard Louis. We were debating Louis versus Lewis, but, I even asked his daughter point blank, it's Louis, right? And she's like, everyone kind of called him that, and it kind of took on a life of its own, but I always knew him as Lewis. So I know the names are very personal. If somebody's calling me something other than Kevin, I'm probably going to give him a stink eye.
What's up, Kevy?
Well, maybe besides that, I suppose. But
no, and it's like you were saying earlier. Obviously, a name is important, and it's sort of, I know one of the things I had a college professor tell me. It's like, it's not what people call you, it's what you answer to, and but in a way, I'm with us not knowing now that it's Lewis. There is a sort of maybe lightness or familiarity with Louis, where it's like, obviously Lou, short for Lewis, you sort of add the E to the end of it. Oh, it's like, hey, Louis, how's it going? And I could see why something like that would stick. But yeah, very, very good to know before the ceremony what the man's official name was. So glad we got that sorted.
Absolutely. Neil Hise is another inductee, longtime Cemco guy. Jack, just like you handled the Tom Hill coverage for Pit and Quarry, you dove into Neil Hise's story, and it's an interesting one that goes back, kind of has some humbling roots along the Lewis Johnson lines as well. But tell us, what did you learn as you talked to Neil, and you talked to his daughter as well, Jen, right?
Yeah. So Neil, it's funny, Neil and Tom kind of have not polar opposites, but they have very, very different beginnings. Whereas whereas Tom really wasn't involved in aggregates until the 80s, until, he was out of school. Construction is pretty much all that Neil Hise has ever known. He and his mother emigrated to the States in 1947. His father served in World War II. So they ended up coming over, settling in New Mexico, and pretty much right away his father got to work working on highways. They lived in a trailer beside construction camps, beside crushers, and he sent over a great photo that's going to be in our induction video that we play at the Hall of Fame, where I'm pretty sure it was Neil's mother, Neil, and I believe a sister or a relative, that they're playing in a little pond, a little body of water, and right next to it a crusher's running full bore. And it's like, what a cool photo. What a great way to describe just how ingrained in his life construction and aggregates are. So his father again was working that, and Neil grew up around that. His father broke off, did a couple things on his own before ultimately acquiring his own company, Crusher Service Co., which is the company that ultimately became Cemco. Neil had served in Vietnam, came back, was working for his father a little bit, and part of the work that Neil was doing is he was repairing roll crushers, with the abrasive New Mexico material that they have out there. It was a pretty frequent thing for those roll crushers to go down, or for them to have to reshape or remold different things. And he said after a point he would work through the weekends to repair a roll crusher, and then a week later a customer comes back in saying, it's banged up again, need you to fix it again. And he just got so sick of it that he decided, like, there's got to be something better, there has to be a different way. So he took, essentially, there was the concept out there for the vertical shaft impact crusher, but it had yet to be effectively put to use due to different castings available, due to different parts that couldn't really be implemented correctly, at least in aggregates. And Neil sort of put his own design on it. He, as he described it to me, he drew out the blueprints, he sketched it all out, and he and his father got together with West Coast Alloys, a company they were working with, for some wear parts, and they came together, and after some trial and error, they ended up producing their first VSI in 1967, sold it in 1969. Was not an easy sell, believe it or not. As for something that is such a common part of the industry now, it wasn't easy when it first came out because there was so much attention that had to be paid to it. As Neil puts it, you had to check it daily or weekly. It wasn't something, in his words, that you can just turn it on, pick up your lunchbox, and let it crush. Like you had to keep an eye on it. So it took a while, and obviously over the years, it's evolved into what the VSI is now, something that's pretty synonymous with the industry. In his own words, and this might, I wonder how he and Lewis got along. Given that, Lewis was responsible for the roller bearing cone crusher. Neil despises roll crushers. In his own words, he will tell you he despises roll crushers. His daughter, Jennifer Hise will tell you that Neil despises roll crushers. It was kind of funny, the passion with which he wanted to find a better option. Kind of an interesting little tidbit there. But I think one of the biggest things in talking with Neil, he took over as president and owner of the company in 1981 after his father was having some health issues. Second generation president, second generation owner, again, like I was mentioning earlier, like so much of the aggregate industry is. And in that time, it was just so apparent, not only the love and passion that he has for the industry, but the love and appreciation he has for his wife, Taiwana, and his daughter, Jennifer Hise Trujillo, who worked the business with him. He has another daughter that, when I talked to him, he sort of said, Jennifer was helping with Cemco, and my other daughter blessed me with grandbaby. So he kind of equated the two of those that way. And, he just talked so much about working with Taiwana, working with Jennifer, and just what, it's sort of the stereotypical, like I couldn't have done it without him. And it really sounds like that's the case, just such a great support system he had. And, having it be sort of that family business mentality is just awesome to hear about. And most recently, Neil stepped down in 22. Jennifer Hise Trujillo took over as president of Cemco. And then in 23, Superior Industries bought Cemco, rebranded Cemco under the Superior name, but kept the Cemco name on the VSIs that are going to continue to be produced by Superior. And that was just such a huge thing. I in talking with Neil and Jennifer, they both got pretty emotional thinking about that, where it's like, that's our legacy, the people that work at Cemco, what we built at Cemco, that's what we are leaving the industry. So even though, Jennifer is now technically a Superior employee, no longer a Cemco employee, Neil is, kind of off doing his own thing now, enjoying retirement off in New Mexico, and still bragging about his wife in pretty much every email and text I've been sending to him. So that's awesome to see. But yeah, that Cemco name is going to live on, and people aren't going to forget where the VSI as we know it today came from.
That's a life's work in that company name. I always find it interesting as a company changes hands, 'cause, we report on M&A, mergers and acquisitions, quite a bit. We saw Superior and Cemco come together, and, in so many cases across the industry, producers, our readers, they're so loyal to a certain brand. In VSI crushers, I feel like there's a loyal, dedicated base of users for them, and there's not many manufacturing companies out there that are doing VSIs, and so probably in a way the loyalty that customers from Cemco have for that brand, for reasons they want to see that continue. We've seen cases in the past too where companies or customers love the color of certain brands, and when that changes, there could be issues because people, the people in our industry, they're so loyal to a fault, I guess you could argue. But we're excited to usher Neil Hise into the Hall of Fame, along with his three counterparts here in another couple weeks, and that's 3 of our 4 Hall of Famers, and we have one more on the producing side. This, of course, would be Charlie Luck IV from Luck Stone, based down in Mannequin, Virginia, and anybody listening probably is familiar with Luck Stone, or if you've been with our podcast for a few episodes. I think we've mentioned Luck Stone by name, and we've talked about autonomous hauling at least in a couple of different episodes, and that's a Luck Stone story that kind of reflects what Charlie Luck's company is doing now. But as I was thinking about the Hall of Fame and some of the people that are in our industry that others look up to, Charlie Luck is certainly one of them. And he comes from, a line of quarrymen. He's the third in that line, who really commanded the respect and admiration of his peers. Charlie's the third Luck family member to go into our Pit and Quarry Hall of Fame. His father, Charles Luck III, went in back in 2018, and 5 years before that, Charlie's grandfather went in, Charles Luck Jr. This is a company that has 101 years of history now. It's the largest family-owned and operated company in the crushed stone, sand, and gravel space. And when you stop and think about, Luck Stone and what Luck Stone represents, I mean, I think about the term goodness and trying to do the right thing, setting the example, too, for how our industry strives and should strive to do things in so many different ways. And, again, they've been doing that for generations. In the last few decades, that's been under the helm of Charlie Luck IV. And there's not one area that anybody who has any experience in our industry can't really look up to this company for how they go about doing business. And, again, it all starts with people. They have a mission to ignite human potential. They have a model based on something called values-based leadership. And, the people who go to work at Luck Stone, I've talked to many over the years, and they talk about what a privilege it is to work for that company. The people who don't work for Luck Stone, who work, in tandem with them as a partner or a vendor, they admire them. Their competition admires them. Our industry, again, as we talked about, it's getting more consolidated. It's harder, I would argue, to be, a family-owned and operated producer today, when you've got some Goliath companies out there that are, entering key growth markets that are seeing more population shift, and yet Luck finds ways to compete. One of the stories I wanted to share that I kind of pulled in based on some of the coverage I was planning for Charlie Luck's story was this approach that the company takes on the community relations front. They were working in a South Carolina county, looking at establishing a greenfield there, getting their Luck Stone place, putting some roots down. And I think when we hear the term greenfielding today, there's such a aversion to it across our industry. Everybody says it's so hard to do, it can't be done, it's so time consuming, it's so costly. And those people aren't wrong, but the way that Luck Stone goes about this is completely different. It's completely 180, you can argue. So in this, I think it was Chester County, South Carolina, I believe, long before, the first rock was even mined, Luck Stone sent some salespeople down there, some company representatives, and they invested in the community. They joined boards, they joined, associations. They showed that they cared. They gave back. They put money into the community, and they put themselves first before they asked for something back from the town, from the municipality. And that's not really the way we usually hear about it developing or transpiring, yet that's a success story. Giving back to the community. And it all comes back to people. We hear a lot, nobody wants the quarry in their backyard. Well, if you go to show that you're caring and you value the community and you're willing to give back and, be there when the community needs you, I mean, it can be a partnership, and, that's a Luck Stone approach. Charlie worked very much hand in hand with his father, and his father, of course, learned so much and embodied the values that his father had, and it's amazing that they've been able to do this for 3 generations. And I mean, it doesn't end. I mean, on the equipment and technology front, they're trendsetters and go-getters, and we talked about them previously about the autonomous hauling. In the years before that, they were exploring remote control loaders for purposes of safety. So this is a company that everybody admires in our industry. You don't hear a bad word about Luck Stone, and really, I think I've seen and heard from other producing companies that are like, we want to try to follow the Luck Stone model. That's easier said than done, in part because the Luck Stone model is based on, values that were passed down, from grandfather to father, father to son. And, Charlie's sharing, those values with his people. And, that can't be done overnight. The Luck Stone way can't be achieved overnight. But it doesn't mean that we can't try and look to Luck Stone as a model for how to do things the right way. There's a lot of admiration there.
Yeah, no, I mean, I think, you summed up what is such an impressive career and legacy, and really a generational legacy, like you were talking about, with his father, his grandfather also being members of our Hall of Fame. And we probably could have spent the entire episode on Charlie if we wanted to. And this really is such a stacked Hall of Fame class. You would look at this and you look at everyone that's in here and you're just in awe. But I kind of, like I was mentioning or teasing at a little bit earlier, I look at Charlie Luck, and that to me is sort of like, all right, well, this is Mariano Rivera. This is unanimous first ballot. This is no brainer. I mean, what he and what his family has been able to accomplish is just remarkable. And even in just the almost 3 years that I've been with Pit and Quarry, being able to meet people from Luckstone. I haven't had the pleasure of meeting Charlie yet, but I'm looking forward to meeting him in Nashville. And like you mentioned, I've talked to so many different Luck employees, and all of them constantly just best attitude, have never had a bad thing to say about the company, are so happy to be working there, never want to go anywhere else. They wear it as a badge of honor. I was at C&D World late January, and I saw my buddy Eric Griffith there. He's a Luckstone guy that I've gotten to know over the years, and he's wearing a suit and he's got a little Luckstone lapel pin on, and it's like these guys just love working for this company. They love working for Charlie, and it is so evident that, like you said, sort of that Luckstone way is sort of like that Patriot way almost, where it's like not everyone can do it, but they know what they're doing, and they have laid the groundwork. They have cultivated that environment. They have cultivated those relationships, and they've made it such a special place to work. And just the last thing I'll bring up, you talk about sort of being the trendsetter, or being, the sort of being the model. I think back to one of the first stories that I at least remember you doing on Luckstone. You had taken a trip out to one of their facilities. I can't remember exactly where it was. And sort of your takeaway was that it was the cleanest, nicest warehouse you have ever seen. And I remember you showed me pictures, and obviously we posted some pictures with the story. It looked brand new, and I'm sure it wasn't, but it was spotless. It was unbelievable. And it's those small things. It's that attention to detail that if you started at the top, that's gonna flow through the whole company. And it's just so evident that Charlie, his father, his grandfather have just really made this such a special and great place to work. And it's, just as it is with the first three men we mentioned, so incredibly well-deserving for Charlie Luck IV. Really looking forward to meeting him in Nashville and seeing him accept this award.
Yeah, to your point, Jack, where there's a will, there's a way. You talked about attitude. The attitude of Luckstone employees is phenomenal. I think there's sometimes too much negativity out there. Like, I can't do that. That's impossible. It cannot be done. No, like the Luckstone way is like, we'll find a way. We'll work together. You talk about the quarries being spotless, and why can't they be that way? Just because they were, the standard for the industry was, at one time so much lower. Like, who says we can't elevate, these into things of beauty? Just because there aren't autonomous haul trucks today, doesn't mean we can't find the way there. We're probably going to get there. Like, let's get there and let's lead. A lot of that comes from Charlie. From Charlie, it came from his father and grandfather before that. And again, congratulations to Charlie Luck, and we're looking forward to celebrating down in Nashville with you and the Luckstone team here before not too long. Well, just a reminder, the Pit and Quarry Hall of Fame induction ceremony is going to be March 24th. It's at the Omni Nashville Hotel. You can get tickets for that at pitandquarryhalloffame.com. It's a black tie ceremony, so don't show up in a T-shirt and shorts.
Crap. I gotta get a suit.
There's still time, Jack.
All right, good, perfect.
Yeah. Jack, anything else you want to add?
No, just I'm excited to take part in what's now my second Hall of Fame. Looking forward to seeing everyone there. Just very, very, very proud to be a part of this group and to be a part of, the Hall of Fame, and just 4 incredibly, incredibly well-deserving inductees. So congratulations to them on their amazing careers, and, in Tom and Charlie's cases, careers that are still going on. So yeah, just very, very excited to get down to Nashville and be around such aggregate greatness, if you will.
Well, thanks for listening. Hope everybody enjoyed this episode of Drilling Deeper. We'll see you next time.